They called her the Phantom of the Price Territory, an Omega with no pack, no protection, and no voice. But the Night Watch noticed something impossible. Everywhere she went, whether she was hauling water from the frozen creek or disappearing into the forbidden forest where silver mist clung to ancient pines like burial shrouds, 3 distinct, small shadows followed her. 3 wolf pups who snarled at armed guards twice their size, but curled into her arms like she was salvation itself. The pack whispered that Charlene Weinstock was cursed, that her golden hair glowed with dark magic, that the pups were demons she'd summoned from the dead zone. Beta Cain wanted her eliminated before her madness spread. But when Alpha King Leon Price returned from 10 years of war, his eyes the color of winter ice, his hands still stained with the blood of foreign battlefields, and decided to track the Phantom through the mist-choked woods on his first night home, he didn't find a traitor or a witch. Before we get into the story, take a second to subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know if this story reaches Canada, the United States, Australia, Africa, or the United Kingdom. Let me know where you're listening from. Now, let's begin. He found a secret that would burn his kingdom to ash and rebuild it from the flames. This is the story of the Omega who became a beacon for the condemned, and the king who learned to kneel before her light. The laundry house of the Eastern Price Pack compound smelled of lye soap, damp wool, and desperation. Charlene Weinstock wrung out a blood-stained sheet with hands that were more callous than skin, the raw cracks in her palms stinging as the caustic water seeped into the wounds. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. The industrial washers had stopped their grinding chorus half an hour ago. The other Omegas, Tessa with her swollen ankles, old Mira who coughed blood into her sleeve, had collapsed into their thin cots in the adjoining dormitory, but Charlene still had 3 more loads to finish. She was always behind. Always running out of time. Still at it, Phantom? Charlene didn't lift her head. She knew that voice, Margot, one of Beta Cain's favored enforcers. A woman whose cruelty had been sharpened by years of clawing her way up from Omega ranks herself, determined never to fall back down. Margot leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, picking her teeth with a sliver of wood. "You work slower than a lame mule," Margot observed, her tone conversational but laced with venom. "Beta says you're wasting resources. Says maybe we should cut your rations in half. See if hunger makes you faster." "I'll finish," Charlene said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, roughened from years of swallowing screams. She kept her eyes fixed on the murky water, watching the blood bloom and fade as she scrubbed. Eye contact invited challenges. Challenges got you beaten. And beatings meant she couldn't move well enough to slip past the perimeter guards tonight. Couldn't reach the hollow in the forest where 3 small bodies waited, shivering and starving. She'd learned that the hard way. "See that you do," Margot sneered, pushing off the doorframe. "And Phantom? Next time you sneak off after shift, remember, Beta's got cameras on the South Treeline now. He's watching. Always watching." The door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the empty laundry house like a death knell. Charlene's hands tightened on the sheet, knuckles white, water dripping onto the stone floor. The fabric tore slightly under her grip. She forced herself to breathe slowly, counting each inhale like she'd taught River to do when panic seized the little pup's throat. 1, 2, 3. Margot was lying. Had to be lying. There were no cameras. Cain was paranoid, but he wouldn't waste resources monitoring Omega servants. 4, 5, 6. But what if she wasn't lying? Charlene's gaze drifted to the narrow window above the wash basins. Through the grimy glass, she could see the edge of the forest, where moonlight turned the mist silver. Somewhere in those trees, Luna was burning with fever that wouldn't break. Ash's wounds from the last beating had reopened. River was so terrified she couldn't shift back to human form anymore, couldn't remember what it felt like to have hands instead of paws. "They need me. Cameras or no cameras," she would go. She always went. Because if she didn't, no one would. Charlene waited until Margot's footsteps faded completely before she moved. She hung the torn sheet on the drying line, her movements mechanical, practiced. Then she slipped out the back door into the frozen night. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. February in the Northern Territories was merciless, the kind of cold that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground. But Charlene barely felt it anymore. She'd stopped feeling a lot of things 3 years ago. The smokehouse sat behind the main kitchen, a squat stone building that reeked of hickory and cured meat. The door was locked, but the ventilation grate on the east side had been loose for months. No one had bothered to fix it. Why would they? Only rats would be desperate enough to steal scraps. Charlene was counting on that. She squeezed through the gap, ignoring the way the metal scraped against her ribs, and grabbed what she could find in the darkness, a handful of fat trimmings the cooks had discarded, 2 chicken carcasses still rich with cartilage, a heel of bread gone hard as stone. She wrapped everything in her threadbare coat and slipped back out, moving like smoke through the compound. The forest waited at the edge of the territory, a wall of darkness that even the moon couldn't penetrate. But Charlene knew the way. She'd walked this path so many times her feet had memorized every root, every stone. The mist came alive as she crossed the perimeter, thick and luminous, catching the moonlight and transforming it into something ethereal. Silver threads of fog wound between the ancient pines, turning the forest into a cathedral of shadows and light. Beautiful. Deadly. The Forbidden Zone, where silver deposits in the soil burned shifter paws and made the air taste like metal. No one came here, which made it the perfect hiding place. Charlene found them in the hollow beneath a massive oak, 3 small shapes huddled together for warmth. Luna lifted her head first, her amber eyes glazed with fever. Then Ash, scarred muzzle pulled back in a warning growl that died the moment he recognized her scent. And finally River, the smallest, who shook so violently her teeth chattered even in wolf form. "I know," Charlene whispered, dropping to her knees in the frozen dirt. "I'm sorry I'm late." They swarmed her. Not attacking, worshipping. Luna pressed her burning forehead against Charlene's chest. Ash licked her raw hands with desperate gentleness. River buried herself in the folds of the coat, whimpering. Charlene unwrapped the food with trembling fingers. "Eat slowly," she commanded softly, but they were already tearing into the scraps with the desperation of the starving. She let them eat first, always first, while she examined them by moonlight. Luna's fever was worse. The pup's body radiated heat that had nothing to do with wolf warmth. Ash's wounds, claw marks across his shoulder from a training exercise gone wrong, had reopened, crusted with dried blood. And River couldn't stop shaking, trapped in a loop of terror her young mind couldn't escape. "The king returns tomorrow," Charlene said quietly, stroking Luna's burning ears. The pup leaned into her touch, seeking comfort. "You have to go deeper into the forest. No sounds. No tracks. If he finds you..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Her hands began to tingle as she petted Luna, a strange warmth spreading through her palms. In the darkness, a faint golden glow emanated from her fingertips, so subtle it could have been a trick of the moonlight. Luna's breathing eased slightly, the fever dropping just a fraction. Charlene didn't notice. She never did. She held them until they finished eating, until Luna's eyes grew heavy, until Ash's growls softened into something almost peaceful, until River finally stopped shaking. Then she kissed each of their heads and stood. "Be safe," she whispered. "I'll come back tomorrow night. I promise." She turned to leave, pulling her coat tight, and froze. Fresh paw prints marked the ground behind her. Massive, boot-sized, still steaming slightly in the frozen air. The mist shifted, and a growl rolled through the trees like distant thunder. Deep, primal, ancient. Then the eyes appeared. Ice blue, glowing in the darkness, fixed directly on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. A voice emerged from the shadows, rough as gravel, cold as winter death. Interesting, it said. The phantom has substance after all. The man who stepped from the shadows was not what Charlene expected. She'd heard the stories. 10 years of war had turned Leon Price into a legend, a king who'd torn through enemy lines like a force of nature, who'd come home wearing a crown forged from the bones of his enemies. The rumors painted him as 7 feet tall, scarred beyond recognition, more beast than man. The reality was somehow worse. He was tall, yes, but not grotesquely so. Maybe 6'5" in human form, broad-shouldered and lean in the way of predators who never stopped moving. Dark hair fell across a face carved from hard angles and old violence, a broken nose that had healed crooked, a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, another cutting through his jaw. But it was his eyes that made Charlene's breath catch. Ice blue, cold as a winter sky, and utterly, terrifyingly aware. He looked at her like he could see straight through to her bones. Charlene dropped immediately into a submissive crouch, exposing her neck, pressing her forehead to the frozen ground. Her heart hammered so hard she thought her ribs might crack. This is it. This is how I die. Stand up. The command wasn't loud, but it crackled with alpha power that made her body obey before her mind caught up. She rose on shaking legs, keeping her eyes down, her neck still bared. Leon circled her slowly, boots crunching on frost. She could feel his gaze cataloging everything: the threadbare coat, the dirt under her nails, the fading glow in her palms that she still didn't understand. He stopped in front of the hollow where the pups had been moments ago. They'd scattered at his approach, vanished into the deeper woods like smoke. Smart pups. You're feeding rogues on my territory, Leon said flatly. Not a question. An accusation. They're not rogues, Alpha. Charlene's voice came out steadier than she felt. If she was going to die, she'd die telling the truth. They're children. Your children. Something flickered across his face. Explain. 3 pups. Exiled 6 months ago by Beta Cain. She risked a glance up, met those ice blue eyes for half a second before her nerve failed. Luna, Ash, and River. Marked as defects. Sent to the Forbidden Zone to let nature take its course. Defects? Leon's voice had gone dangerously soft. Luna has chronic fever. Ash was scarred in a training accident. River is, she can't shift back to human form anymore. The trauma locked her. Charlene's hands fisted in her coat. Beta Cain said they weakened the bloodline. Said it was protocol. Humane relocation, he called it. Humane relocation. Leon repeated the words like they tasted of poison. His expression cracked, just for a moment. She saw something raw underneath the cold mask. Rage. Grief. Betrayal. I was told. My king. The shout shattered the moment. Beta Cain came crashing through the underbrush with 4 guards at his heels, all of them armed, all of them panicked. Cain was a handsome man by most standards, golden-haired, strong-jawed, the kind of face that inspired trust. But Charlene had learned to see past surfaces. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the fear. Thank the ancestors, Cain panted, pressing a hand to his chest in mock relief. We've been searching everywhere for you, my king. When we heard you'd gone into the Forbidden Zone, his gaze landed on Charlene and his expression twisted with disgust. I see you've encountered our problem. Problem? Leon's voice was flat as a blade. This Omega is delusional, my king. She's been spreading disease among the lower ranks, claiming to see visions, talking to herself in the woods. Cain gestured to his guards. We need to quarantine her immediately before. Quarantined. Leon interrupted, his eyes never leaving Cain's face. Or silenced. The forest went very, very quiet. Cain's smile faltered. I don't understand, Alpha. You told me all defective pups were humanely relocated to the Western Sanctuary. Leon took a step forward. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. You gave me reports. Photographs. Transfer documents. Yes, and they were. So explain to me, Leon continued, voice soft as silk over steel, Why I just found 3 half-starved pups in a hollow. In my forbidden zone. Where you sent them to die. Kane's face went white. My king, if I may. No. Leon turned back to Charlene, who was still frozen in place, unable to process what was happening. You. Omega. What's your name? Charlene Weinstock, Alpha. Charlene Weinstock is under my direct protection as of this moment. Leon's voice cut through the night like a cleaver. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally. Is that clear? Kane looked like he'd been struck. But Alpha, the protocol. Fuck protocol. Leon's eyes flashed, and for a heartbeat, they weren't blue anymore. They were molten gold, his wolf rising to the surface. I want answers. And she's going to give them to me. He extended a hand toward Charlene. She stared at it like it might bite her. Come, Leon said quietly. We have much to discuss. The Alpha's private study was nothing like the dungeon Charlene had braced herself for. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the eastern mountains, where dawn was just beginning to paint the sky in shades of bruised purple. A fire crackled in a massive stone hearth. Bookshelves lined every wall, packed with volumes that looked ancient and well-loved. The desk was carved from a single piece of black walnut, its surface covered with maps and correspondence. It looked like a place where someone actually lived. Thought. Felt. Leon gestured to a leather chair near the fire. Sit. Charlene remained standing, hands clasped in front of her, eyes fixed on the floor. Sitting felt like a trap. Like permission she hadn't earned and would pay for later. That wasn't a request, Charlene. She sat. The chair was so soft it felt obscene. Leon moved to a side table where a silver service held a teapot and cups. He poured without asking, the scent of chamomile filling the air, and pressed the warm cup into her trembling hands. Then he crossed to the door, opened it, and spoke to someone in the hallway. Bring food. Real food. Bread, cheese, fruit, meat if we have it. Quickly. The door closed. Leon leaned against his desk, arms crossed, studying her with those unsettling ice blue eyes. When did you last eat? Charlene's mind went blank. Yesterday. I think. Maybe the day before. You think. Time gets confused sometimes. A muscle in Leon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. A moment later, a servant appeared with a tray laden with food, more food than Charlene had seen in a month. Fresh bread, still warm from the oven, soft cheese, sliced apples, roasted chicken. Eat, Leon said quietly. Charlene's pride wanted to refuse. Her stomach had other ideas. She reached for the bread with shaking hands and tore into it like an animal. The taste exploded across her tongue: butter, salt, herbs, and she had to fight not to sob. She couldn't remember the last time food hadn't tasted like ashes and desperation. Leon watched her devour half the loaf before speaking again. Tell me about Luna. Charlene swallowed hard, bread catching in her throat. She's 6. Maybe 7. Hard to tell. The fever started 4 months ago. It comes and goes, but it's getting worse. She can't hold her wolf form for long anymore. Reverts to human, and then she's so small, Alpha. So cold. Ash. 8. His father was Delta Marcus. Died in the border skirmishes 2 years ago. Ash tried to avenge him, went after a rogue twice his size. Got his face torn open for it. Charlene's voice dropped. Kane said scars like that made him unmarketable as breeding stock. Leon's hands curled into fists. And River. 5. Maybe younger. Charlene's voice broke. Something happened to her before I found her. I don't know what. She won't shift back. Can't speak. Just shakes and shakes and shakes. How long have you been feeding them? 6 months for these 3. But there have been others. Before them. How many others? Charlene looked up, met his eyes for the first time, really met them. All of them. Every pup Kane exiled, I tried to save. Some I got to in time. Some I didn't. Leon moved his desk, pulled out a leather folder, and spread papers across the surface. Territory records. Transfer documents. 23 pups marked as relocated to Western Sanctuary in the past 3 years. I sent money. Resources. I received confirmation reports. He looked at her. Tell me the Western Sanctuary exists, Charlene. There is no sanctuary, Alpha. Then where? His voice cracked, raw with something that sounded like anguish. Where are they, Charlene? She forced herself to hold his gaze. Dead. Or worse. Sold. The word hung in the air like poison. Then Leon's beast erupted. The alpha pressure slammed through the room like a shockwave. The windows cracked. Books flew from shelves. The teacup in Charlene's hand shattered, tea splashing across her lap. She threw herself from the chair, hitting the floor, covering her head as the desk overturned with a deafening crash. And then silence. Charlene looked up, trembling. Leon stood in the center of the chaos, chest heaving, eyes blazing gold. His hands were claws. His canines had elongated. He was half-shifted, caught between man and monster. But he hadn't touched her. Slowly, visibly, Leon pulled himself back. The gold bled from his eyes. His claws retracted. His breathing steadied. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. I didn't mean, are you hurt? No. Charlene's voice was barely a whisper. You stopped yourself. Of course I stopped myself. Leon looked at her like she'd said something insane. You're not the enemy here, Charlene. You're the only person in this entire damn territory who's been telling the truth. He extended a hand to help her up. She stared at it, the same hand that had just destroyed half the room, and then took it. His grip was gentle. Careful. Help me end this, Leon said quietly. Please. Help me burn Kane's operation to the ground and bring every single pup home. Charlene opened her mouth to answer. The alarm shattered the moment. A harsh, mechanical wail that made her blood run cold. Leon's head snapped toward the window. In the distance, headlights cut through the pre-dawn darkness. Trucks. Moving fast. No, Charlene breathed. No. Leon was already moving, grabbing a radio from the wreckage of his desk. Report. A crackled voice. Beta Kane's hunters located 3 juvenile wolves in Sector 7. Cage trucks en route to processing facility. ETA 12 minutes. Charlene's world tilted. They found them. He found them. Leon's eyes met hers, blazing with fury and promise. Then we take them back. He shifted mid-stride, clothes tearing as his wolf form exploded outward, massive, black-furred, crowned in authority. And together, they ran into the dying night. Leon's wolf form was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Charlene clung to his back as they tore through the forest, her fingers buried in midnight black fur, her body pressed low against his spine. He moved like liquid shadow, massive paws eating up ground with impossible speed. The crown, somehow still present even in wolf form, an iron circlet that seemed fused to his skull, caught the moonlight as they burst from the tree lean onto the mountain road. The convoy was a quarter-mile ahead. 3 trucks, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn mist. Leon didn't slow down. He accelerated. They hit the lead truck like a battering ram. Leon's shoulder connected with the driver's side door, the impact so violent the entire vehicle flipped, rolling twice before slamming into a ditch. Charlene was thrown clear, hitting the asphalt hard enough to see stars. For guards spilled from the remaining trucks, weapons drawn. Silver-tipped batons. Tranquilizer guns. They didn't hesitate, just opened fire. Leon was already among them. Charlene had never seen anything like it. He moved with the brutal efficiency of someone who'd spent a decade at war, every strike precise, economical, devastating. A guard swung a baton at his head. Leon caught the man's wrist in his jaws and twisted. Bones snapped like kindling. Another guard fired a tranquilizer dart that would have dropped a normal wolf instantly. Leon tanked it, didn't even flinch, and backhanded the shooter hard enough to send him airborne. 30 seconds. That's all it took. For guards down, unconscious or moaning. Not dead, Leon had been careful, but completely neutralized. Charlene scrambled to her feet and ran to the cargo truck. The back doors were padlocked, but Leon's claws made short work of the metal. The doors swung open. And there they were. 3 small shapes huddled in a cage barely large enough for one. Luna's eyes were glazed, her fever radiating heat even from 10 feet away. Ash's muzzle was bloody from trying to bite through the bars. River was completely catatonic, collapsed in the corner. "I'm here," Charlene gasped, fumbling with the cage lock. "I've got you, The lock broke. She yanked the door open. Ash lunged. He hit her chest first, snarling, teeth bared. For a horrible moment Charlene thought he'd bite her throat out, but then confusion flickered across his eyes. He sniffed her frantically, whining. Her scent was wrong. Contaminated. Mixed with alpha power and pine and something sharp and dangerous that made his hackles rise. "It's me," Charlene pleaded, but Ash was panicking, caught between fight and flight. Her hands exploded with light. Golden fire blazed from her palms, so bright it turned the pre-dawn darkness into noon. The light poured over Ash like water, warm and safe and utterly hers. The pup went rigid, then slack, the aggression draining out of him instantly. Luna and River scrambled forward, drawn to the light like moths to flame. They pressed against Charlene, surrounding her, a protective circle of small bodies and desperate need. Charlene stared at her glowing hands in shock. "What?" A low growl rumbled behind her. Leon's wolf form approached slowly, carefully, his ice blue eyes fixed on the pups. They immediately bristled, placing themselves between him and Charlene. "No," Charlene said quickly, her voice shaking. "It's okay." She looked at Leon, at this massive predator who'd just torn through 4 armed men to save 3 children he'd never met. "He's safe. He's ours." The word slipped out before she could stop it. "Ours." Leon's ears twitched. Something in his gaze softened, just fractionally. The pups looked at Charlene, then at Leon, then back. Slowly, so slowly, Luna took a single step toward the massive wolf. Sniffed his front paw, sneezed, then curled up against it. Ash and River followed, collapsing in an exhausted heap at Leon's feet. Trusting her judgment. Accepting him because she had. The moment stretched, fragile and impossibly precious. Then Leon shifted back to human form, suddenly naked and apparently unconcerned about it. He grabbed a guard's abandoned jacket and wrapped it around his waist before moving to the cab of the cargo truck. "What are you?" Charlene started. "GPS," Leon said grimly, yanking the device from the dashboard. His expression went dark as he scrolled through the data. Destination coordinates. A warehouse 30 miles south. And look at this, shipment schedules. Buyer contacts. Inventory logs. He turned the screen toward her. Charlene's stomach turned as she read. Inventory, 43 units. Condition, varied. Awaiting transport, 43. 43 pups. "There's more," Leon said, his voice rough with barely controlled rage. "A lot more. Kane's been running this operation for years. Multiple facilities. Multiple territories." He looked at the 3 pups huddled together, at Charlene still glowing faintly in the growing light of dawn, and his jaw set with absolute resolve. "Every pup," he said quietly. "Every single one. We're bringing them all home." Charlene nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They loaded the pups carefully into Leon's vehicle, a sleek black SUV that had followed at a distance, and began the drive back to the estate. Luna had fallen into a fitful sleep in Charlene's lap. Ash and River pressed against her sides. They were half a mile from the gates when Leon's radio crackled. "Alpha Price." His head guard's voice was tense. "You need to know Beta Kane has called an emergency council session. He's demanding your immediate removal from power. Claims you're mentally unstable. Dangerous. The vote is set for tomorrow night." Leon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Tomorrow night. Blood moon ceremony, sir. All pack members required to attend." Charlene's blood ran cold. The blood moon. The most sacred and most dangerous gathering of the year. Where challenges could be issued. Where alphas could be overthrown. Where omegas could be executed for treason. Leon glanced at her, his expression grim. Then we have 24 hours, he said quietly, to prepare for war. Leon's study had transformed into a war room within hours. Maps covered every surface, territory boundaries, trafficking routes marked in red, suspected holding facilities circled in black. Financial records were spread across the floor in careful sequences, tracking money that had supposedly gone to sanctuary maintenance, but had actually vanished into offshore accounts. Charlene sat cross-legged among the papers, her golden hair falling forward as she cross-referenced shipping manifests with transfer dates. She'd sent word through the Omega network, the invisible servants who cleaned, cooked, and were never noticed, and information had come flooding back. Whispered conversations overheard in Kane's office. Unusual deliveries to the South warehouse. Guards who'd been paid extra to relocate specific pups and told to keep quiet about it. The picture forming was worse than either of them had imagined. 47, Leon said hoarsely, staring at the ledger. 47 pups in 3 years. And I was here for some of it. Before the war. How did I not? He's good at hiding, Charlene said quietly. That's what predators do. They make you look the other way. A sharp cry cut through the room. Charlene was on her feet instantly, running for Leon's private quarters where they'd hidden the pups. She burst through the door to find Luna convulsing, her small body arching off the bed. The fever had spiked to dangerous levels. Charlene could feel the heat radiating from 6 feet away. No, no, no. She pressed her glowing hands to Luna's chest, pouring moonfire into the pup with desperate intensity. The light blazed, brighter than before, and Luna's convulsions eased slightly. But the fever didn't break. The glow couldn't touch whatever was burning her from the inside. Move. Leon's personal medic, Dr. Cade, pushed past with his bag. He was an older wolf, gray-bearded and sharp-eyed, who'd served Leon's family for 40 years. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking pupils, pulse, temperature. Then he drew blood. The wait was excruciating. Charlene stayed at Luna's side, maintaining the moonfire even as exhaustion made her hands shake. Ash and River pressed against her legs, whining. 20 minutes later, Dr. Cade returned. His expression was grave. It's not natural fever, he said. She's been poisoned. Slow-acting toxin, probably administered weeks ago. Designed to mimic illness, ensure eventual death. He looked at Leon. This wasn't neglect, Alpha. This was murder. Leon's eyes flashed gold. Can you cure her? If we'd caught it earlier, maybe. But it's advanced. In her bone marrow now. I can slow it by time, but... He trailed off, the words too terrible to speak. Charlene's world tilted. She looked down at Luna's small face, peaceful now under the moonfire's glow, and something inside her shattered. She was still sitting there, tears streaming silently down her face, when Leon found her hours later. The other pups had finally fallen asleep. The war room had gone quiet. It was just Charlene and Luna and the crushing weight of failure. We'll find a way, Leon said, kneeling beside her. There is no way. Cade said. Cade said he couldn't cure her with what he knows. That doesn't mean there isn't another answer. Leon's hand covered hers on Luna's chest. We'll search every territory. Find a healer who specializes in toxins. I can't lose her. Charlene's voice broke completely. I can't. She's. I know. And then Leon did something unexpected. He pulled Charlene into his arms, held her while she sobbed into his shoulder, her whole body shaking with grief she'd held back for too long. He didn't tell her to be strong. Didn't tell her everything would be fine. He just held her, solid and warm and there. I promise you, he said quietly into her hair. We won't lose her. Any of them. Not again. They stayed like that until Charlene's tears ran dry. Until she could breathe again. Then they returned to the war room and kept working. By midnight, the full scope of Kane's operation was laid bare. 47 pups sold. $2.3 million in profit. Buyers ranging from underground fight rings to blood sport arenas to wealthy collectors who treated wolf pups like exotic pets. Some pups had been conditioned as child soldiers for rogue packs, trained to kill before they'd learned to read. The evidence was damning, overwhelming. But as Leon pointed out grimly, evidence wasn't enough. Kane has allies on the council, he said, studying the list of names. Without a confession, they'll claim the records are fabricated. That I'm unstable, paranoid from war. They'll vote me out and install Kane as acting alpha. Then we need a confession, Charlene said. Leon nodded. Which means I'll need to. Let him think he's won. Charlene's voice was steady now, resolved. Let Kane put me on trial at the blood moon ceremony. I'll wear a wire. He won't be able to resist gloating. He'll confess, and you'll have everything you need. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Absolutely not, Leon said flatly. I won't use you as bait. You're not using me. Charlene stood, met his ice-blue gaze without flinching. I'm choosing this. For them. For Luna. For every pup Kane has sold, and every pup he'll sell if we don't stop him. He'll kill you the moment he has the chance. Then don't give him the chance. She stepped closer. You want to save them? This is how. I'm the one person Kane thinks he can destroy without consequence. Let him try. And when he does, we burn his entire world down. Leon stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, respect, fear, and something else she couldn't name. You're insane, he said quietly. Probably. Charlene smiled without humor. But I'm also right. The blood moon rose like a wound in the sky. Charlene had never seen one before. Omegas weren't allowed at ceremonial gatherings. But she understood now why the old wolves spoke of it with equal parts reverence and dread. The moon hung huge and crimson over the ancient stone circle, turning the world the color of spilled blood. Torches ringed the clearing, their flames casting dancing shadows across hundreds of faces. Every pack member had been summoned. Attendance was mandatory. Refusal meant exile. Or worse. Charlene stood at the center of the circle in silver chains. The metal burned her wrists and throat, neutralizing any shifter ability she might have possessed. Not that she had much. Her wolf had always been weak, barely present. But the chains made sure even her moonfire couldn't manifest. She was utterly defenseless. Exactly as planned. Beta Kane stood opposite her, golden and gleaming in ceremonial robes, every inch the righteous protector. Leon sat on the Alpha's throne to the north, his face carved from stone, forced by tradition to remain neutral until the accusations were formally presented. But Charlene could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the throne's arms hard enough to crack wood. We gather under the blood moon, Kane began, his voice carrying across the silent crowd, to address a cancer in our midst. This Omega, he gestured at Charlene with theatrical disgust, has been spreading disease among our ranks. Corrupting our order. Conspiring against our Alpha with madness and lies. Murmurs rippled through the pack. Charlene recognized many faces, Omegas she'd worked beside, guards who'd looked through her like she was invisible, families who'd lost pups and been told they were safely relocated. They didn't know. Most of them truly didn't know. She has violated sacred boundaries, Kane continued, warming to his performance. Entered forbidden zones. Claimed to commune with exiled rogues. Filled weak minds with paranoid delusions about trafficking and murder. He shook his head sadly. I have tried to help her. To offer treatment. But she has refused, and now she has poisoned even our Alpha's judgment. He turned to Leon, his expression concerned, sympathetic. My king, I know you are newly returned from war. Your mind has been tested by violence. This Omega has taken advantage of your trauma, twisted your protective instincts. For the good of the pack, she must be dealt with. Permanently. The crowd murmured agreement. Charlene felt their judgment pressing against her skin like physical weight. Leon's expression didn't change. He simply nodded once. The accused may speak. Kane's smile was victorious. He clearly expected Charlene to grovel, to beg, to break. She didn't. You talk about strength, Beta Kane, Charlene said clearly, her voice carrying despite the chains. About purity and selection. About protecting the pack from weakness. She lifted her chin. Tell me, how strong do you have to be to sell children for money? The murmurs stopped. Silence crashed over the clearing like a wave. Kane's smile didn't waver. Delusional. As I said, she has no proof of these wild. Don't I? Charlene interrupted. Tell them about the holding facility 30 miles south. About the buyers from the underground fight rings. About the $2.3 million you've made selling 47 pups in 3 years. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward Kane. Fiction, Kane said smoothly, but sweat had begun to bead on his forehead. The ramblings of a sick mind. Then explain the GPS data from your transport trucks. Leon's voice cut through the night like a blade. He rose from the throne, pulling a tablet from his robes. Explain the shipping manifests. The buyer contacts. The offshore accounts. He turned the screen toward the crowd. Financial records blazed in the torchlight. Explain, Leon continued, his voice dropping to a lethal quiet, why Dr. Cade found slow-acting poison in a 6-year-old pup's bloodstream. Poison that was injected. Designed to ensure death while mimicking natural illness. The crowd erupted. Shouts of confusion, anger, denial. Pack members surging forward, demanding answers. Kane's mask finally cracked. For just a moment, Charlene saw the truth underneath: cold calculation, trapped animal panic, and absolute ruthlessness. He snapped his fingers. The sound cut through the chaos like a gunshot. 24 figures emerged from the crowd, weapons appearing in their hands. Not pack guards. Mercenaries. Hard killers wearing stolen pack insignias. They formed a circle around Kane, guns trained outward, toward Charlene, toward Leon, toward the 3 pups who'd been hidden at the clearing's edge under guard. You stupid, sentimental fool, Kane snarled at Leon, all pretense abandoned. You think you can come back from war and undo 3 years of perfect operation? You think these sheep will follow you over me? He laughed, harsh and bitter. I've made them comfortable. Fat. Wealthy. They don't care about a few defective pups. They care about their bank accounts. You're wrong, Charlene said quietly. Am I? Kane turned his gun toward her. Let's test that theory. Kill them all. The Omega, the pups, and the weak fool who dared to call himself king. The mercenaries moved. And the blood moon watched as the night erupted into violence. The first gunshot shattered the night. Charlene threw herself sideways as the bullet screamed past her ear, silver burning the air where her head had been a heartbeat before. The ceremonial circle erupted into chaos, pack members scattering, screaming, diving for cover as mercenaries opened fire indiscriminately. Then came a sound that stopped everything. A crash of metal on stone. The holding cage at the clearing's edge, where Ash, Luna, and River had been secured, stood open, its lock broken. And charging through the panicked crowd came 3 small shapes, moving with desperate fury. Luna hit Kane first. Despite the fever burning through her, despite barely being able to stand hours ago, she launched herself at the beta's ankle and bit down. Kane screamed, stumbling, his gun firing wild into the air. Ash was right behind her, a gray blur targeting the mercenary who'd been advancing on Charlene. The pup was small, scarred, half-starved, but he fought like something feral and ancient. He went for the gunman's wrist, teeth sinking deep, making the man drop his weapon with a howl. And River, who hadn't made a sound since Charlene had found her months ago, who'd been locked in terrified silence, howled. The sound pierced the night like a blade, high and clear and impossibly powerful. It wasn't the howl of a traumatized pup. It was a war cry. A rallying call. Every wolf in the clearing felt it resonate in their bones, calling to something primal and fierce. Charlene's chains exploded with light. The moonfire that had been suppressed by silver burst forth like a dam breaking, golden radiance pouring from her body in waves. The chains superheated, metal glowing white-hot, and then simply dissolved. She was free, blazing like a fallen star in the center of the ceremonial circle, and every eye turned toward her in shock. A mercenary raised his gun toward the pups. Leon's beast erupted. The shift was instantaneous and terrible. One moment he was standing on the throne platform in human form. The next, a massive black wolf stood where he'd been easily the size of a horse, crowned in iron, ice blue eyes blazing with alpha fire. The pressure that rolled off him was crushing, absolute, undeniable. Submit. The alpha command slammed through the clearing like a shockwave. Half the mercenaries dropped instantly, their wolves overwhelming their human minds, forcing them to belly crawl in submission. Even some pack members fell to their knees, unable to resist the raw power in that single word. Leon didn't wait. He moved through the remaining mercenaries like death itself, precise, efficient, devastating. A paw strike to the temple, not hard enough to kill but enough to drop a man cold. Jaws closing on a wrist, disarming without tearing flesh. This was a warrior who'd spent 10 years learning exactly how much force was needed to stop a threat without crossing into murder. Kane saw his operation collapsing and ran. Leon pursued in an instant, massive wolf form disappearing into the forest. Charlene gathered the 3 pups, pulling them close as the battle raged around them. Luna was shaking, her fever spiking from the exertion. Ash was bleeding from a cut above his eye. River. A gunshot cracked. River yelped, high and sharp, and crumpled. No! Charlene caught the small pup as she fell. Blood bloomed across River's shoulder, silver-laced and burning. The pup's eyes were wide with shock and pain. Charlene pressed her glowing hands to the wound, moonfire pouring into River's small body with desperate intensity. Stay with me. Stay with me, baby. Please. In the forest, Leon cornered Kane at the cliff's edge. The beta backed up until his heels hung over empty air, 100-foot drop to jagged rocks below. He pulled something from his pocket, a small black detonator with a single red button. Stop. Kane screamed, voice ragged. I've wired the holding facility. 43 pups still inside. You kill me, I drop this, they all die. Leon froze, his massive wolf form going utterly still. His eyes locked on the detonator. Kane laughed, bitter and triumphant. That's right. I win. I always win. Now shift back, get on your knees, and you lose. The voice came from the trees. Charlene emerged, still glowing, her golden hair wild around her face. In her hand she held a USB drive. I already copied your files, she said calmly. Sent them to the High Council, the neighboring territories, the media. They're raiding the facility right now. The pups are safe. You have nothing. Kane's face twisted with rage. He dropped the detonator and lunged, silver knife appearing in his hand, aimed straight at Charlene's heart. Leon was faster. The massive wolf intercepted mid-leap, jaws closing around Kane's throat. Not biting down. Not tearing. Just holding a grip that could kill with the slightest pressure, but chose not to. Kane went rigid, knife falling from nerveless fingers. The pack had followed, flooding into the forest clearing. They watched their alpha hold the beta's life between his teeth. Watched him choose mercy over vengeance. Leon shifted back to human form, one hand still locked around Kane's throat. You'll stand trial, he said quietly. Every territory will know what you are. You'll spend the rest of your life in a cell, knowing you failed. He released Kane, letting the broken beta collapse. And then River screamed not in pain, but in wonder. Everyone turned. The pup stood in Charlene's arms, the silver bullet wound closing visibly under golden light. Flesh knitting together, blood evaporating like morning dew. River shifted, actually shifted, into human form for the first time in months. A small girl with dark hair and wide eyes, whole and healed. The pack watched in awed silence as Omega magic, ancient, mythical, thought to be extinct, blazed in the night. Charlene looked up at Leon across the clearing, tears streaming down her glowing face. And the blood moon bore witness to the moment everything changed. 3 days after the blood moon, Beta Cain knelt in chains before the High Council. The trial had been swift and merciless. 14 conspirators, corrupted guards, falsifying doctors, handlers from the trafficking network were sentenced alongside him. Life exile to the northern wastes, where winter killed slowly and wolves lived like ghosts. They would have years to contemplate their crimes before the cold finally claimed them. Charlene watched from the gallery, Luna sleeping peacefully in her lap. The pup's fever had broken the morning after the battle. Dr. Cade had worked through the night purging the toxin from her system, while Charlene poured moonfire into her small body. It had taken everything she had. She'd collapsed afterward, unconscious for 16 hours, but Luna had lived. They'd all lived. 43 pups recovered from the holding facility, blinking in sunlight they'd thought they'd never see again. Some had been reunited with families who'd believed them dead. Others had been fostered by pack members eager to atone for their blindness. The estate had become a temporary sanctuary, full of laughter and chaos and the sound of pups learning to play again. River sat beside Charlene now in human form, a small girl of maybe 5 with dark hair and solemn eyes. She still didn't speak much, but she could now. The healing had given her back her voice even if she wasn't quite ready to use it yet. She leaned her head against Charlene's shoulder, watching the proceedings with the gravity of someone far older. The council adjourned. Justice had been served. But questions remained. That evening, the Territory Council convened an emergency session. 10 elders sat in a semicircle, their ancient faces grave. Leon stood at the center with Charlene beside him, no longer hidden behind him, but at his side. Elder Miriam spoke first, her voice thin with age. "We have witnessed something unprecedented. Omega magic manifesting in our territory. We require explanation." Leon's response was measured, respectful. Moonfire is the rarest Omega gift. It manifests in true pack mothers, those chosen by fate to protect and heal. It appears once every century, if that. He looked at Charlene. Charlene Weinstock is not just an Omega. She is the Omega, the heart of this pack. And I will not allow her to be treated as anything less. The elders murmured among themselves. Elder Gregor leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You speak of elevating an Omega to a position of power. This is unconventional. Survival often is," Leon replied calmly. The meeting lasted hours. In the end, the council acquiesced, not because they understood, but because they'd seen what Leon could become when pushed. And because 43 rescued pups were hard to argue with. After the council dismissed, Leon took Charlene's hand. "There's something I need to show you." He led her through the estate to the servants' quarters, the place she'd lived for 3 years. Charlene braced herself for the familiar smell of damp and despair. But when Leon opened the door, she stopped breathing. The cramped dormitory was gone. In its place stood individual rooms with actual doors, real beds with thick mattresses and warm blankets. Heating vents pumped warm air. Windows let in natural light. It looked like a place where people lived, not just bodies that worked. "No wolf in my territory will ever sleep on the ground again," Leon said quietly. "I'm renovating every Omega quarter in the territory. This is just the beginning." Charlene's throat tightened. She couldn't speak. Leon led her through the estate to the ceremonial hall, a massive room with vaulted ceilings and ancient tapestries. At the center, on a pedestal of black marble, sat a crown. Not the brutal iron circlet worn by alphas. This crown was delicate, elegant, black iron woven with blue moonstones that caught the light and held it, glowing softly like captured stars. The Luna crown. "I'm not asking you to be my mate yet," Leon said, turning to face her. "We barely know each other. We have time. But I'm asking you to be my partner. My equal. My Luna. Charlene stared at the crown, then at him. Leon, I don't need you because you're an Omega, Charlene. His ice blue eyes were intense, vulnerable. I need you because you see the wolves I miss. You protect the pack I neglect. You light up the darkness I've become. These past 3 days, watching you organize foster placements, coordinate healing schedules, comfort traumatized pups, you're already doing the work. I'm asking you to do it with authority. With power. Rule beside me, not as decoration, but as force. The words hung between them, weighted with possibility. Charlene looked at the crown. Thought of Luna's fever breaking. Of River finding her voice. Of 43 pups learning to smile again. I accept, she said. But on one condition. Leon waited. Every defect, every weakness, every difference we find in this pack, we celebrate it. We build a territory where being different means being needed, not discarded. Where the blind work in acoustics, the small become scouts, the sensitive become counselors. Where no pup is ever thrown away because they don't fit someone's narrow definition of strength. A slow smile spread across Leon's face, the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. Done, he said simply. Write the new laws yourself. He lifted the crown and placed it gently on her golden hair. The moonstones flared, responding to her moonfire, glowing brighter. Charlene Weinstock, who'd been invisible for so long, now wore light like a weapon. Leon took her hand, squeezed once. Then his expression shifted, nervous in a way she'd never seen. There's one more thing, he said, leading her toward the doors. Someone wants to ask you a question. He pushed the doors open onto the estate's main lawn. And Charlene's heart stopped. 1 year later, the Price territory was unrecognizable. Where the eastern compound had once housed cramped dormitories and harsh labor, the Moonfire Sanctuary now stood, a sprawling campus of healing and hope. The main building was 3 stories of warm stone and wide windows, designed by architects who understood that light was medicine. A medical wing staffed by specialists in trauma and toxicology. Training grounds where pups learned their strengths instead of hiding their weaknesses. Family housing where foster parents and rescued children built new lives together. 127 pups called it home now. Rescued from trafficking networks across 6 territories, brought here through a coalition Leon had forged with neighboring alphas. The operation had been massive, coordinated, brutal in its efficiency. And it had worked. The first annual Moonfire Festival was in full swing. Charlene stood on the raised platform overlooking the lawn, visibly pregnant, glowing so brightly in the afternoon sun that she looked like she'd swallowed starlight. The moonfire had intensified with the baby. Dr. Cade had explained, Omega magic recognizing new life and blazing brighter in response. She placed a hand on her swollen belly and smiled at the massive crowd gathered before her. Hundreds of wolves. Thousands, maybe. Pack members, visitors from allied territories, reporters documenting the revolution happening in the northern mountains. We are not defined by what tried to break us, Charlene said, her voice carrying across the lawn without need for amplification. The moonfire gave her that too, a presence that commanded attention without demanding submission. We are defined by what we choose to protect. Every wolf here, no matter how you came to us, no matter what you survived, you are seen. You are valued. You are ours. The crowd erupted in howls, a chorus of approval that shook the mountains. Charlene stepped down from the platform into chaos of the best kind. Luna appeared immediately, now a gangly adolescent with bright eyes and steady hands, training under Dr. Cade as a veterinary healer. She used her experience with illness to comfort sick pups, her gentle manner putting even the most frightened at ease. Mama Char, Luna said, the name all the sanctuary pups had adopted, there's a new arrival. 3-year-old with attachment trauma. I thought maybe you could. I'll be right there, Charlene promised, squeezing Luna's shoulder. Across the lawn, Ash led a patrol of juvenile wolves, 10 adolescents who'd all been labeled too aggressive or too damaged for normal pack life. Under Ash's guidance, they'd become the sanctuary's guardian force, their protective instincts channeled into purpose. His scars were still visible, would always be visible, but now they were marks of survival rather than shame. And River. River sat on a bench with Leon, deep in conversation. The small girl had discovered an empathic gift that bordered on precognition, able to sense tensions before they erupted into conflict. She'd become Leon's most trusted advisor, helping him navigate pack politics with an insight that left hardened diplomats baffled. She still spoke softly, carefully, but when she spoke, everyone listened. Charlene found Leon an hour later on the south lawn, wrestling with Ash and 6 other pups in the grass. The mighty Alpha King was being defeated by a pile of laughing children, his protests of unfair tactics ignored as they tickled him mercilessly. "I surrender," Leon gasped, and the pups cheered. He spotted Charlene watching and grinned, that smile that still made her heart skip. He extracted himself from the puppy pile and crossed to her, pressing a hand gently to her belly. "He's strong," Leon murmured. "I can feel him kicking." Charlene corrected with a smile. "And she'll be fierce, like her mother." Leon kissed her forehead, then her lips, soft and reverent. Around them, the festival continued, music, laughter, the sound of a pack learning to be whole again. As evening fell, they returned to where it had all begun. The hollow in the forbidden forest was no longer forbidden. The silver deposits had been capped, the area transformed into a memorial garden. But the ancient oak remained, massive and eternal, its roots deep in sacred ground. Charlene sat beneath its branches, the 3 pups, now grown, surrounding her. Luna rested her head in Charlene's lap. Ash lay stretched out, content. River curled against her side, eyes closed. Leon approached in his massive wolf form, crowned and magnificent, and settled beside them. His huge head came to rest near Charlene's lap, ice-blue eyes reflecting the moonlight. She glowed gently in the twilight, surrounded by her family, and for the first time in her life felt completely at peace. Once upon a time, a voice whispered, memory or prophecy. Charlene couldn't tell. There was an Omega who glowed in the darkness. The world called her phantom, ghost, nothing. But 3 lost pups called her mother. And a king called her home. This is not a story about being saved. This is a story about saving yourself and taking everyone else with you. The moon rose silver this time, gentle and full, and somewhere in the sanctuary, a pup laughed. Charlene closed her eyes and smiled. Home. Finally, impossibly home. True strength isn't about how loud you can roar or how hard you can bite. It's about standing in the darkness and becoming the light others need. It's about building sanctuaries, not fortresses. Tables, not walls. Thank you for listening to Charlene's story. If it touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe. And tell me, if you found 3 lost pups in the woods, would you have risked everything to save them? Drop your answer in the comments. Until next time, stay fierce, stay kind, and remember, you are never too broken to be someone else's beacon.